Okay, welcome. So, this is the first lecture that I'm giving on the second term. Okay, the second term of this session, and please do keep in mind that now we are moving on to the macro economy. Okay, so when we spoke about very in the very beginning, when we spoke about the microeconomy and the macroeconomy, and when we spoke about the microeconomy, we said that in the microeconomy we are concerned with things like how allocation decisions are made in households, firms, and individuals. How these three make their decisions on allocation of resources. However, when we talk about the macroeconomy, we are talking about allocation decisions on a very big scale, normally on the scale of an entire country. So, when you're talking about how countries allocate, it is not possible for us to go and check what is happening in each and every household, what each and every individual is doing. Instead, we look at certain indicators of how the economy is performing. And when we talk about economy, please keep in mind we're talking about how the entire country is performing. So, one of the indicators that we use is the GDP, and it stands for the gross domestic product. What is the GDP? The GDP refers to, as we already discussed, that any when we talk about economy, what are we talking about? A place where goods or services or both are being produced. So if there is a room and in which we are just sitting and talking, then that is a room. But when in that room we are, let's say we are making this cup of tea and selling it, then that room is not just a room. Now it's an economy because productive work is taking place. So every country is an economy also because in every country some goods and services are produced. Okay, so please do keep that in mind, that GDP is the output, the goods and services that are produced. When you talk about output, we talk about product. When we talk about product, products are of two types: goods and services. Goods are those products that you can touch and which are visible, and services are those which fulfill a need and want, but you cannot touch them and you cannot see them, but they have value for you, so you pay money. So again, let's come to GDP. What does GDP include? All the things that are here may be included in GDP. All the things that are here may be included in the GDP. GDP includes the uh, services. It includes bus service. It includes mining. It includes picking up the trash. It includes, making the tractors. All these things may be sold into the market for money. Now, please do keep in mind we are returning to the first lecture. What did we say in the first lecture? In the first lecture, we said that effort is of two types. Human activity is of two types. There can be non economic activity. So, what is non economic activity? Activity which is carried out for the love or for the compassion. If I lend someone a helping hand, if someone is standing on the road and I just give him a lift, I take him from one place to another free of charge. I'm doing it out of love. That is non economic activity. I'm doing it out of compassion. That's non economic activity. I'm not charging anything for that. But if the same service is provided by a taxi, they're definitely going to charge money and sometimes a lot of it. So that is economic activity. Economic activity is for making some earnings. Okay, so you produce goods and services, sell it in the market, make some earnings. What's the net result of that? That increases your purchasing power. Over time, it increases your wealth as well. So when we are talking about GDP, please keep in mind, what is GDP? Goods and services that are being produced. Now, this is the conceptual thing. This is the conceptual part. In specific terms, what is included in GDP? There are four components of GDP. Number one, personal income. Okay, personal income is included in GDP. Personal consumption is included in GDP. What you consume, what the consumer consumes. What is a consumer, by the way? Consumer is any person who purchases goods for his own use. So now think of it. A consumer goes into the market and demands a good. That means the good will be produced. When the good is produced, only then can he consume. So output will increase. So personal consumption is an indicator of output of the country. It's an indicator of the GDP. So when personal consumption goes up, GDP also goes up. Because when you are consuming, you're demanding, goods are being produced, output of the country is increasing. That's the first thing. Second, it's not just consumption by individuals. What about businesses? Businesses also consume. Businesses want uh, a certain equipment. Let's say a business buys a factory. Let's say a business buys a plant. So what happens? That plant will have to be built. It's like it's being produced, it's going to be produced, and then the business is going to get it. So the business expenditure is called investment. It's not called consumption, it's called investment. So the business is going to invest, it's going to buy. When the business buys certain equipment or certain plants or certain facilities, those have to be produced. The output of the country goes up, the GDP of the country goes up. All right, so that's the first component is consumption, the second is business investment, the third component is government spending. Spending. What do you mean by spending? Spending again here means purchasing. All things are related to purchasing. When you talk about personal consumption, related to personal purchase. When you're talking about business investment, it's related to business purchase. When you're talking about government expenditure, it's related to government purchases. Government purchases, government is a very large thing. Government is not something small. Okay, so when a government purchases, it purchases in massive quantities. Okay, the government has to fight a war, for example. So, what is it going to purchase? A single bullet? No. The government is going to place an order for millions of copper bullets, for example. It's going to place an order for hundreds of tanks. It's going to place an order for hundreds of aircraft. Maybe it will place an order for a carrier or two carriers. Now, these are massive things. These are expensive things. Now, when they are to be built, the output of the country goes spiraling up. Okay, when the government puts money, uh, a lot of things will be produced. Let's say a government wants to build a bridge. It says we are going to buy a bridge. And please keep this in mind. Governments usually buy things that do not exist at that time. These things will have to be built over a period of time. So they want to build a bridge. Think how many engineers will have to produce the plans? How much how much cement will have to be produced? How much iron and steel will have to be produced? So a lot of output of the country will increase if the government makes demand, when the government starts to spend or buy, as I've already said. Fourthly, what's the fourth thing that increases the GDP? The fourth thing which increases the GDP is exports, net exports. If your goods are being demanded outside the country, if let's say Pakistani goods are being demanded in the UK, then goods will have to be produced first. Once the goods are produced, only then will they be exported. Once the goods are produced, the output of the country goes up and the GDP of the country rises. Okay, so please keep in mind there are four components to GDP: personal spending, business spending, government spending, exports. or personal purchases, business purchases, government purchases, and export purchases. The personal purchases are called consumption, the business purchases are called investment, the government purchases are called spending or government spending, and the spending by importers or people in other countries is called net exports. Okay, please revise this and keep this in mind. Don't forget this. These are the four very important components, and they will keep coming back in the later lectures. And I have here taken the example, for example, of Japan, because Japan is a very classic case. There are many countries in the world that have high GDPs, like the United States of America, China, but Japan is a classic case. Japan was completely destroyed in the Second World War in 1945, completely decimated, completely destroyed. But then by 1975, it was a power to reckon with. It was a massive economy. Its GDP had risen to 5.5 trillion. This is 2019, by the way. In 2019, Japan's GDP went up to 5.5 trillion US dollars. What does it mean? It means that the value of goods that Japan was producing in 2019 was 5.15 trillion dollars. Just imagine the level of output that they were producing. So what were they producing? Their main exports, of course, we know, are electronic items. That's what they were producing, and they were selling it in the market for a price, and in return they were earning $5.15 trillion, and that's how Japan was becoming a prosperous and a rich country. Okay, so please try and understand these concepts. The GDP is the goods and services which are being produced. In the next lecture, we are going to see whether this output that we produce in a country, do we take its value, do we take its market value, or we take its actual quantity. All right. I hope this was useful. Please do revise this. Thank you very much, and see you in part 2 of this lecture.